Michael Sussmann got acquitted, to no surprise. He got acquitted in D.C. It's a D.C. jury base, so that's the pool that you're choosing from, so there's no surprise there. But I still think this is a win. The whole point of, I'll just say, my idea of the whole point of Trump appointing Durham was to expose as much as he could publicly. We knew, nobody thought there would be any type of indictments or convictions, I should say, in DC. Nobody realistically. Everybody hoped. You don't know. Can never assume. Just like I said, Twitter, Elon would never purchase Twitter. It's not happening. I still don't think it will, but the process at least got further than I thought it would. So we still held out hope, but in the end, we knew it was about exposing corruption. Just like Rand Paul held up the last money to Ukraine bill. And he said, no, I'm fine with the money to Ukraine. Just let's monitor it. Let's have a special inspector, make sure that the money's going where we say it's going, and to can track it and audit it. They said no. So the bill still went through. We knew it would. But Rand Paul exposed things. I'm sorry, right now that's a win. We have to be realistic. And I think what happened here is a win. It's exposed. It's waking more people up. And I think some people have really stood up to shine. And I'm going to read the headline here. The breaking news, Michael Sussmann is acquitted. But I think someone is really stepping up, and that's Robert Gouveia. Robert Gouveia. I forgot. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. A lawyer, LawTube, is doing an excellent job. So I'm going to get to who was really on the juror pool and what happened. I'm going to end on a comment on the New York Times and anti-friend of show, Charlie Savage, who is one of the most trash writers out there. I'm not talking about his skills. I'm talking about his intent and content. He is basically, I consider him like a deep state operator, a cover-up artist, and not a journalist. And that's Charlie Savage right here. He's the one they put on this one. This was a high-profile one. They trust him a lot to do the covering up for Clinton, Hillary, the DNC. So let's go through a little bit of this article here, and then I'll get to the takeaway after it's done here.
Washington. Michael Sussmann, a prominent cybersecurity lawyer with ties to Democrats, was acquitted on Tuesday of a felony charge that he lied to the FBI about having no client in 2016 when he shared a tip about possible connections between Donald J. Trump and...
So Michael Sussmann went to his friend, Baker, of the FBI. So Baker knows everything about him. He knows who he works for and all that kind of stuff, allegedly. And he went there and he said, I'm not working for anyone. I just want to give you this information. It wouldn't have been exposed if this hadn't happened. And that's the best you could have hoped for.
Hillary Clinton, of course, was running for president in 2016, ultimately lost to Donald Trump. But when she was running, she had two entities that she was working with. One, of course, was Hillary for America. We know a lot of these people. Robbie Mook is his name. We always say Mook here on the channel because it's a lot more condescending. John Podesta, Jake Sullivan, and Jennifer Palmieri. You know, John Podesta and Jennifer were high up in the Clinton campaign. Jake Sullivan was an advisor, and he posted a tweet for Hillary Clinton that we may get to later. But Jake Sullivan now is in the current Biden White House. So he just kind of bounced from the Hillary campaign over to the Biden administration. And they were running a big, aggressive campaign. Donald Trump was their primary enemy, and they needed to win. So what did they do? Well, like any campaign does, they got a bunch of lawyers involved, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what they did is they hired a law firm called Perkins Coie, and Perkins Coie had a very powerful lawyer there, a guy by the name of Mark Elias. Mark Elias and other lawyers at Perkins Coie enlisted the activity, the help of a consultant called Fusion GPS. Now, you see, when we explore Fusion GPS, we see all sorts of different tentacles here. And you may remember from the 2016 election, things like the Steele dossier, the Trump PP tape, and so on and so forth. All of that is something that was generated by this consultant. And so Perkins Coie hired this legal consultant called Fusion GPS, which put together a very big team with a number of different people to go out and start investigating Donald Trump, really to create some oppositional research and to see if there was any connections between Trump and Russia. Or many people would argue, like yours truly, that they were sort of encouraged to create these connections even where none existed. But these are the people behind Fusion GPS, and many of these people were witnesses in the trial. But we know that Mark Elias was the campaign lawyer, the chief campaign lawyer for Hillary Clinton. Working under Mark Elias was, there he is, Michael Sussmann, the person who is the subject of this entire trial. He's the guy that actually had the meeting with the FBI in 2016. So after all of these PP tapes and white papers and all of these stories, these dossiers alleging that Donald Trump was colluding with Russia or had a secret back channel to Alpha Bank, they funneled them back up through Fusion GPS, through the law firm, back over through Mark Elias, who was a high up at the law firm and the Clinton campaign, and they gave it over to Michael Sussmann. Michael Sussmann then had a meeting with the FBI in September of 2016, in the month right up before October, waiting for an October surprise to drop so that Hillary Clinton could easily win the 2016 election. There was a meeting that took place, and this is where the big lie starts. Sussmann sits down with a guy named James Baker, general counsel at the FBI, and he says in text messages and other things we'll talk about that there was no reason for him to come other than he's just a good citizen coming on his own volition. He's not there on behalf of a client. He's not there representing Hillary Clinton at all. He tells that to James Baker. James Baker, allegedly, as somebody who receives this information working at the FBI, is highly concerned and says all of this is damaging to the country. It might be a national security risk. So he has notes and he has meetings with his deputies, the deputy director, Bill Priestep, Tricia Anderson, who take notes about this entire meeting. James Baker, though, didn't take any notes. He just sort of remembers what took place at the meeting. And so there's a lot of conversation taking place about what happened at that meeting. Did Michael Sussmann say to Jim Baker, I'm not here representing another client, I'm not representing Hillary? Did he say that? Or did he say, I am representing Hillary? Because as we're going to see, the evidence showed during the trial, there were all sorts of billing records showing that after Sussmann met with the FBI, he actually might have billed Hillary Clinton for it. And so that's really the underlying facts very, very quickly. So in this investigation, special counsel John Durham said that Michael Sussmann lied to the FBI, claiming he wasn't representing a client when he was, and that would have biased the FBI. That would have been a material consequence for the FBI. It caused them to do something differently. And it's kind of a problem when you lie to the federal government. So he indicted him and charged him with that one crime, very, very specific crime. And the trial started out of the DC Circuit Court, and we covered it in depth. As you can see, day one, we had a quick overview of some of the jurors here. And this was a difficult thing to assemble because they were playing musical chairs in the courtroom. And I don't think a couple people moved chairs, so I wasn't able to actually retrieve out their numbers.
The Durham saying that he lied to the FBI without having, because he billed the Clinton camp for the time. So he's like, you obviously were working for Clinton. We all know he was, allegedly, but the jury did not agree. So this verdict, they're saying the verdict was a significant blow to the special counsel, Durham, who was appointed by the Trump administration 3 years ago to scour the Trump-Russia investigation for any wrongdoing. He has exposed, he's opened my eyes to it. I never knew. And I can reach out. However, if it's one person that watches this, and you can say where you disagree or agree, people already helped me in the chat when I did this months ago or in February. We were talking about this. And a lot of this news came out late last year. So it is a success. Charlie Savage wants to paint it as a failure. It's not a failure. We knew there was no chance. If they would have convicted in DC, that would have been the shock of the century. So now he's painting Durham as a failure. Let's go first to the jury pool to talk about why might it not be a surprise that nothing happened here.
Problem for Durham is the jury and the judge. I mean, he is facing a jury that has 3 Clinton donors, an AOC donor, and a woman whose daughter is on the same sports team with Sussman's daughter. I mean, the exception of randomly selecting people out of the DNC headquarters, you could not come up with a worse jury.
Welcome to Washington, D.C.
Right.
All right. Jonathan Turley, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
We're following all of this.
And that's how the system is designed to work. So we are in very dangerous times, because if we don't have enough moral connectivity, like a moral foundation, whether it's DC or you're in a rural part of the country, or you could pick any part of the country randomly. You pick 100 spots in the country, and we have a moral foundation. We know what a woman is. We know what lying is, what's right or wrong. We don't have that anymore. So there's nothing illegal that happened here. That's how the system's supposed to work. But the jury of your peers, it's in Washington, D.C. That's why they've controlled Washington, D.C. They dominate it. It's not really a Democrat thing. It's Democrats and Republicans, establishment against anyone else. Doesn't matter who. The only person that's a real threat right now is Trump. That's why it's all going against Trump. So what that jury said is, you can do this. So now I'm looking at it, I'm like, why would they do this? Why wouldn't they do this? Now that the trial's over, there was very low risk of any harm coming from it. They didn't get any bad press. Sussmann, Clinton, barely any bad press at all. That's why social media, this video that you're watching right now, will automatically get deranked. Can't get anywhere else. No matter whether there's misinformation, dis or mal or what, it doesn't matter. It's a topic that you wouldn't want out there. So you take everyone who would expose it, squash them. What's the risk? So the laws are only there if people are going to uphold them. He can lie. That's why they were so, I'm like, why were they so nonchalant? Why are they lying to the FBI, CIA, like nothing's going to happen? Because nothing's going to happen. So that's where we are. That can happen. That happened. And you have people like Caitlin Johnstone, who, Caitlin's right on a lot of things, or I agree with Caitlin on a lot of things. For Caitlin to not care about this or to expose this and to say MAGA's fake, that doesn't line up for what they had to do. This is 2016 and they still lost. They still lost. And then they had to allegedly ramp it up to fortify it for 2020 and look out below for 2022, 2024. What's a more harsh word than fortification? And Caitlin Johnstone, somebody on the progressive left, doesn't care about this, thinks this is all fun and games and it's all fake opposition. No, Caitlin, you're wrong. And you should care too, if you really do care about people. So there's more receipts. I want to get into the details of a little bit, because lawyer Robert, I can't pronounce his last name, so let's call him Lawyer Robert. Visit his channel. I'll put a link in there if I can, after the video's uploaded at some point. He's just great.
Here's what we know about some of the people who may or may not be on the jury. And remember, some of these people may have been stricken from the jury. So we're not exactly sure, but this is about as close as we can to the details. I know for sure that some of these people are in fact going to be final jurors. We're just not sure who. We have a teacher, a gymnast, somebody without really any political persuasion there. We see.
I'm going to stop you there, Robert. So number one, we're in DC and it's a teacher gymnast and there's no known political affiliation, but this is 2022. I just did a story about in Illinois, they're doing race-based grading now. They're changing the curriculum or the way they're grading to try and sway the percentages of people who are doing well based on skin color. There's an ideology there. What teachers are you seeing out here that are pro-MAGA? So we don't know, but in DC, I mean, come on. We know what to expect from a teacher in DC.
A Treasury Department employee, somebody who works for that branch of government, somebody who's also a DNC primary donor. And if you zoom in on this, you can see that when asked about this by the prosecutor in voir dire, it says, hey, if you would have donated to a campaign, who would that have been? The prosecutor asked very quickly in the questionnaire you filled out, you mentioned that you donated in 2016 to a presidential campaign. Any idea who that might be? He said, I think in the primaries. Prosecutor said, well, do you mind sharing who that might be in the primaries? He said, well, probably would have been somebody on the Democratic side, probably a couple of campaigns. We also have a medical illustrator. We have another lawyer, somebody who was a Hillary donor, and don't get a lot of specifics from her. The prosecutor said, you mentioned in 2016 you may have donated to somebody in the election. And she said, well, I think I started to write that, but it could have been the 2020 election. I can't remember. And then the prosecutor said, well, I think you said that you likely donated to Hillary. And she said, well, had I donated, that's how I would have done it. And so she kind of stands out as somebody who might be political and partisan. We have a 25-year-old who loves the game Elden Ring, which I haven't played yet. A mechanic. We have a father who worked for a senator, Senator Corker, which means this person might actually...
Before we get to Senator Corker, we talk about the 25-year-old who plays Elden Ring and lives in the D.C. area. A lot of these games, not Elden Ring to my knowledge, are going to this woke side, woke ideology. And you see that tie-in right here, just like I talked about Batman being pro-Antifa. Now, Batman would always go for the highest concern, highest villain you might call. And Batman would never be pro-Antifa, though, especially with how Antifa operates right now. So my point is, it ties so beautifully into the critical theory for school and then into the games. And you see the person here, and Robert's like, oh, he's like, there's no political ideology. Well, it's a young person in D.C. who schools pretty much indoctrinate, force you to be an ally at the very least. All ally means is anti-MAGA. It doesn't. What else does it mean? Ally includes anyone except for MAGA. So that's what the probability. I don't know the juror, but the probability is high. So you see how that funneling from the top, this neo-Marxism that is controlled by the ruling class, funnels down to the bottom, and you get that person on the jury that has to rule against Hillary. Are you serious? That person would never. I mean, the probability of getting a person that would have the cojones to even go against Hillary in this backdrop, the chances are very low. This stuff doesn't happen by accident. Robert goes on to mention Bob Corker. Bob Corker? Yeah, Bob Corker was considered a conservative. Whatever that means. I mean, every topic's different, so I don't really even label people like that anymore. Like you're just generally this or generally that. But Bob Corker he's still alive. He just isn't in the Senate anymore. He was a never Trumper. In September, after he announced he would not seek re-election, he intensified his opposition to President Trump, accused Trump of lying, debasing the United States, and weakening its global standing. So Trump is against all the globalism, Paris Treaty, world organizations, all that. Corker's establishment. Same team as Hillary Clinton. Just he's not the quarterback. He's just a bench guy. Wiki was kind of salty. Wiki attacked him anyway, saying that he used his powers to help Trump, whatever. But then he said he hasn't ruled out primarying Trump in the 2020 election. He did not do that. But all I'm saying, I'm bringing that up for, is Robert's bringing up this guy, this juror, like this juror is a Corker, so he's a conservative, so maybe he's for Trump, and it could be, I don't know, but Corker himself is anti-Trump.
We have a father who worked for a senator, Senator Corker, which means this person might actually be sort of conservative-ish. We don't know. He still works in the government there in D.C. We have another person from the Peace Corps, another government contractor, and then 0517 is a juror who really dislikes Donald Trump. When the prosecutor asked her about her 2016 feelings, she said, people have strong feelings. And you answered that you have very strong feelings. You said you answered that you strongly dislike Trump. And she said, and that you're not sure you can be impartial. And she said, yeah, if this was someone on his team or something, which many people might argue, John Durham is kind of somebody who might be aligned with Trump's interest. And so we don't know if that juror would consider that prosecution to be something that was pro-Trump. We don't know. But that's what the jury looks like. We also have...
So that's the jury. And thank you, Robert, for the receipts. Such good work there. LawTube is unbelievable. So I'm going to end with this on Charlie Savage. This is a video I did February 14th, I believe. Was that Valentine's Day? Let me double check that real quick. No, 16th. So it did this video February 16th about Charlie Savage and the big takeaway. My takeaway stays the same. I am going to add this to it before I play this clip and go out, is this clip from Cat Turd. Cat Turd said, "You didn't need the rigged Sussmann trial to tell you that justice is dead in America. The FBI, CIA, DOJ, and 99% of DC serve only the Democrat Party. They're corrupt, rotten, will plant evidence, frame people, and will do anything to punish their political opponents." Let's go to the next segment, continuation. I tweeted today that this article that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to back up why I said this. This is one of the lowest moments in the history of American journalism. No hyperbole. I'm not going to say it's because I don't know every moment. It is one of the lowest moments. We're going back to this quote. Sussmann allegedly pitched the allegations that we know that he knew allegedly we knew that Jaffe knew was bull. They went to the New York Times with it. You think the New York Times knew it was bull? Of course they probably did, allegedly. So they took that there. So can you understand? So Sussmann went to the New York Times. So imagine you have a newspaper and the lawyer comes to you with a white paper, just basically a whole thing detailing why Donald Trump he's working with the Russians. And you find out it's a lie. Wouldn't you be angry or at least point that out? Instead, the New York Times has a headlines that say court filings started a fervor in right-wing outlets, but their narrative is off track. You're the ones that had lies fed to you directly by the guy who's being indicted. And they come out with that? This is Charlie Savage. I quote from the article, but the entire narrative appeared to be mostly wrong or old news. The latest example of the challenge created by a barrage of similar conspiracy theories from Mr. Trump and his allies. They're trying to disorient you. We don't know what's real or true anymore. Ask your common person what happened. They won't have any idea. And this also gives ammo for those pro-authoritarians to say, oh, I can share this link. Doesn't have a fact check in the title because the fact check stuff is getting real stupid. That stuff might go debunked because it's getting really stupid. Nobody cares about this title of fact checking anymore. So he's giving those pro-authoritarians, here's the ammo for you to fight back when neutral parties or even Democrats or people on America First say, what's going on with all this spying allegedly stuff? Unbelievable quote right here. Listen to this. Upon close inspection, these narratives are often based on a misleading presentation of the facts or outright misinformation. They also tend to involve, wait for it, please listen to this part. This is from the article of Charlie Savage, the article headline I just read for you. They also tend to involve dense and obscure issues, so dissecting them requires asking readers to expend significant mental energy and time. And raising the question of whether news outlets should even cover such claims. This is one of the worst pieces of journalism I have ever seen in my life. That line alone, much less the other issues, is one of the most bizarre things I have ever seen put in print. He basically said, y'all don't need to get too deep into this kind of stuff. Y'all are too stupid. He just said, you, me, everybody, you are all not only deplorables, you are too damn stupid to understand what's going on. This is what the Democrat GOP establishment think of you and me. He literally put it in print. Why is this not? I mean, this is the biggest story in the US right now. The New York Times said the information in not just this, he's speaking generally speaking, all these issues that we talk about, Joe Rogan talks about, that we might get wrong at times, we have to do corrections or clarifications. He said they're too dense and obscure. It takes a lot of mental energy and time. You're goddamn right, it takes a lot of time. I'm doing it because you're not. Unbelievable. Raising the question of whether news outlets should even cover such claims. I don't even know what to say at that. I'm just gonna keep on moving. I have no idea what to say. And then he's using this whole thing as an example of what he just talked about. This latest example began with the motion that the special counsel Durham filed in the case about his possible links. So they were talking about, well, it includes some old and new information. I put a link to the filing directly in the YouTube. We don't need the New York Times. We can read it and look at it ourselves. The indictment further details, on this date, 2017, defendant provided an updated set of allegations, including the Russian bank. So now we're talking about after the election. That's new. That's not what we talked about in the last segment, relating to Trump, to a second agency. So what we talked about, if it's September, was the FBI. What we're talking now is the CIA. Who goes to the CIA? So Sussmann did the same thing he did with the FBI, allegedly, to the CIA. Who goes to the CIA with information that the CIA should know is bunk? He expected the CIA to be in on this cabal, to do whatever they needed to do. And here's my opinion. This is allegedly. It was basically, I'm here on behalf of Hillary. Boss? The one that was allegedly with Pete Davidson? Like Hillary. So I'm here on behalf of Hillary, Mr. CIA. Do what you need to do. That's what it comes across to me. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. Why would you go to the intelligence agency that should know what's real or not with no verifiably false information about Trump? If it wasn't a message that, hey, you all need to make this happen. That's what was going on. It's right there in the documents, Charlie Savage. I don't need you. This one was not hard to read. Tech Executive 1, I showed this yesterday, and others had assembled pertaining to Trump Tower, the New York City apartment, the EOP. The EOP is the Executive Office of the President. So this happened after he was president. How could it be the Executive Office of the President if he wasn't president? Who was he getting this from, Obama? So for Savage, he said none of this, well, he didn't cover this, so none of this was newsworthy for him. All he said was setting off a fervor in right-wing outlets. It's right there, Executive Office of the President of the United States. So it's afterwards. Then they were talking about cell phone uses. The defendant further claimed that these lookups, when he was talking to the CIA now, demonstrated that Trump or his associates were using rare Russian-made wireless phones. Do you remember that? Rare Russian-made wireless phones in the vicinity of the White House. How would they be using phones in the vicinity of the White House? Were they outside the gates? Were they just outside the gates with it? Or it would be after they were president? I'm going to end with this. Percentage of Americans, this is from Axios, who trust traditional media is just falling off the cliff. Nobody trusts them. Why would you trust? This is just garbage. Why does that matter? The faith matters because if we don't trust the government, we don't trust the media, then where are we? There's no glue holding it together right now. I talked about yesterday, people know the stories. People are still missing this part of this story, of this polling. Even today, it says they poll people who are following what we just talked about, not people who don't know it. People who are following it, 75% of them say, yeah, you got investigated. 2/3 of Democrats. So we were chatting on Twitter, and Bumbletron said he had a lengthy discussion with his wife about what's happening. How can we hope to have an informed conversation with any of our lefty friends and family if we all literally live in two separate realities? The truth isn't the truth for both of us. How are we going to do that? Somebody else came in and said, bingo, we're literally operating on two separate sets of facts. Is the sky blue or red? Then I said, we need revolutionary change. The civil conflict route is not revolutionary change. What it is getting people to fight against each other, and that gives the oligarchy the advantage because they have institutional power right now, and half of the people are with them. Revolutionary change is people on both sides holding the government accountable. So the government's not controlling either group that's making the revolutionary change. They don't want people to unite for that reason. Bumbletron said it. We go back to Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party back in 2008. They wanted to make sure that those two groups would never be the same. All you have to do is throw race into it. And now critical theory makes it even stronger. I talked about it. Hillary Clinton's comment, after you read all this and find out, you're like, man, she really said that about citizens knowing all this stuff, allegedly? Let me know what you think.